I have autism, and as many of us like to be, we want to have a lot of friends. We want to experience what it's like to become popular, because there's always a social hierarchy among all the neurotypical people. There are the people who are good with girls, there are the guys who love sports, and then there are the nerdy kids, and they kind of get overshadowed by the popular neurotypical guys. So how do we become more popular as a neurodivergent person? Well, it just so happens that back in school I spent many years trying to become popular. To some extent, it did work, and I will tell you exactly how it went. And the primary way I did this was by approaching the neurotypical crowds with full confidence, expecting nothing and just going for it. Seriously, it's a recurring theme as a person with autism. To overcome your social difficulties, you must step out of your comfort zone and be willing to try something new, no matter the consequences. And some of these consequences can be your old friends, and that's completely natural. As life moves on, you're going to experience new friendship groups, new ways of life, and sometimes you have to leave the old behind. And as someone who finds change really hard, I found that really difficult to accept. I don't like moving on. I don't want to leave this house, but I know that I have to further my goals in the future. That's why I go on monthly travels, somewhere new, somewhere unfamiliar. I may not even know the local language. That's why last May I went to Bali for the whole month. I wanted to know what life was like in tropical paradise and see what else life has to offer. Anyway, going back to school, I experienced many environmental changes as I went through it. So back in primary school, I was in a year full of 90 students. Not much changed in the 7 years that I was there, except for a few kids moving out of the class and being replaced with new students as they moved away from town. Back in primary school, you are primarily friends with the boys or girls in your class. Mostly boys, as was my case. I was really scared of girls until I was about 13, so I didn't have any luck with them, but I had the odd interaction with them, and I would obviously try and impress girls, as young boys do when they're finding out about girlfriends for the first time in their lives. And basically at every break time, I'd just hang out with the boys and enjoy, play football, play patball, play whatever sport was available, and just have fun, like any normal boy. In secondary school is where my demographic of friends really started to change. It all started in year 7. I was 11 years old and I was very much quite quiet. You know, me being Aspergic and not knowing the people around me. I was now in a year full of 140 boys, all of which, except for 10 or so, I did not know. So I felt quite scared. I didn't want to approach new people. So I made friends with the kids who sat closest to me in class. I had a good friend called Keanu. He was my first great friend at school, and he was cool. He had a really cool gaming PC. I was super interested. I didn't have a gaming PC. I just played Nintendo my whole life. I loved Nintendo so much as a child that I was known as Mr. Mario back in my class because I always wore Nintendo or Mario t-shirts. And Keanu was into games like CSGO. It was so fun. And I went to have some sleepovers with him in year 7 and 8 from when I was 11 to 13 years old. And then I hit puberty and I decided to try and make more friends. I became friends with the people in my class who were also kind of the nerdy type, but these guys were also open to mingling with girls at the girls' school. And so naturally I joined in. Starting from about the age of 14, I went out and hung out in the park with the other kids like you do as a teenager, and I had some good fun. And that's how I got my first girlfriend when I was 15 years old. We only dated for 2 months, but it was a great first experience. All of this was possible because I joined their group of friends and went out on the adventures with them. They were cool guys, but I wanted to climb the hierarchy even further. So when I was 15 years old, I decided to play patball with the other kids in my year, the ones who seemed to get all the pretty girls and go out and have fun and have all the parties. The people who were usually the kind to bully the lesser known, maybe more neurodivergent crowds, the ones who hung out with less popular girls and all that. It was really mean of them to view others like that, but I wanted to join them, to know what it's like to be the perpetrator rather than the victim, metaphorically speaking. I didn't engage in any of this bullying, but I wanted to know what it was like to not be the victim. You know, being a neurodivergent person, you are usually the victim of bullying. And it's hard because you don't know how to act a different way or act in the way they seem fit, and you're seen as a social outcast. I experienced that all my life, and I didn't want to experience that anymore. And it seemed like the easiest way to break out of being the victim was by joining the perpetrators. I never turned my back on my old friends, but I started to distance myself a bit more in favour of the more popular kids, because I wanted to be popular. And if you want to be perceived as more popular, you have to hang out with the more popular kids. So from the ages of 15 to 17, I hung out with the popular kids, and I kind of stepped away from the old friends I had, the ones I really bonded with, the ones I gamed with, the ones I had sleepovers with, in favour of a better social life. At least that's what I perceived at the time. Now I know that popularity is not the whole picture of a good social life. I'll get to that. So in the summer of 2020, when I was 16, I was hanging out with the kids on the park. COVID had just eased up and we were allowed to meet up again, so I went to the park every day because I had nothing better to do. School had closed until September, so I had all these great times to hang out in the lovely sun. It was such a great summer that. Once again, I barely saw any of the nerdier friends, though they eventually came to the same meetups which I was taking part in. I had a good time, had fun, and I saw plenty of girls in that time because I was with the popular crowd and we had no problems with seeing girls and talking to them, and because I was copying their behaviour, I in turn became very socially adaptable and boosted my skills. Then when I was 17 years old, I gave myself a reality check. I thought, all these friends of the past, they were really good. Keanu, the gamers, those were actually really good times. And deep down inside my heart, I am a gamer, I am a nerd. Even though I may be good at socialising now, I may be with the popular crowds, I kind of forced my way in. I want to go back to that a little bit. So I spoke to my friend James in my maths class, someone who you would never think of meeting just on a spontaneous moment, but I was in his maths class and I decided to look over at his laptop. He was looking at some Discord servers and he was using this really cool new VPN, and I was thinking, wow, that's cool. Can I try that out? And so we struck it off and he showed me a silly game called Conan the Mighty Pig on Steam. It costs about 70p. And I just thought it was hilarious. It reminded me of all those times in the past where I would play silly games like Gmod. And I just felt so happy. I was laughing so much with him. And I decided to stay in touch with him. And so eventually, when we left school, I decided to text him and say, how's university applications going? Because I know he did a gap year. And he said, yeah, I'm joining York next year. And so when we were 19, he texted me asking for some help. And he said, I'm trying to make new friends at York. How do I make them? And I told him the best piece of advice that I found out at my university: go to the student union fair and join societies. That's the single best way to form your friend group there, because at least you know in that group you will all share the same main interest. And so he joined the comedy society at his university, and now he's the president. And I'm thinking, well done, mate. That's all you're doing. Well done. So I think that I came full circle in the end, embracing my past friendships with the nerdy people. I went back to that when I was 17, that's 4 years ago now. I dropped my ego to the side and went back to the people who reminded me of my younger self. I was just like them all those years ago. And seeing them evolve and flourish in university, like one of my very good friends, Kieran. When he turned 17, we didn't hang out in big friend groups or anything, but I started taking him out to these socials, like what I described in the park meetups during COVID when I was with the popular kids, and I basically replicated that but with him. I went from the student to the mentor, metaphorically speaking, by forming my own friend group, and we had a blast. And now Kieran's life, his social life really, is almost better than mine. It's amazing what he's doing because he's good at taking the initiative. I may have pushed Kieran and James in the right direction, but it was all their doing. And my friendship journey just goes to show that anything is possible. If you have Asperger's syndrome and think that you can't socialize, look at what I've done, look at what my friends have done. Because even though Kieran and James may or may not have been diagnosed, I know they have nerdy interests, and they eventually found their footing in social scenes, which just goes hand in hand to prove my point that it is possible. You can have a great social life, experience popularity for yourself if you have Asperger's syndrome like me, or any form of autism which you think may hinder your social difficulties. With these lessons that I have shared with you today, I hope you now know that it is definitely possible. Trust me, my last few years of my life at university have been problem-free. No one has been able to tell that I have autism and therefore hasn't judged me on it and therefore hasn't placed me lower on the social hierarchy. Plus, popularity doesn't matter so much in university. You have your own friend groups, you do not compete with each other for status or popularity. But because of my previous experiences fighting for status or popularity, I was in a good position when I entered university, and I made great friends, people who are like me, who like to go to the pub or some fancy place where you wear suits, sip cocktails, and look classy, or go and play football in the football club at the uni, and have some really good times with the societies. And all you have to do is take that first step out of your comfort zone and get involved. If you would like to personally talk to me, I can help you out with overcoming the social difficulties if you have autism or you think you have autism. I will use my 18 years of experience to help you in overcoming your social difficulties and helping push you in the right direction to make your social life great again. To learn more about my services, please click the link in the description. I'll see you in there. So to summarize, I started off as a nerdy kid when I joined secondary school, 11 years old. Then, when I was about 15 years old, I stepped into the more popular sphere. I kind of distanced myself from the nerdy side in favor of the more popular kids for a while. And that wasn't the best decision because at that point I didn't see my old friends. And then in the final stage, I came back to the nerdy friends and basically implemented the lessons I'd learned in my middle phase, my more popular phase, and brought those skills back over to my nerdy friends to teach them how they can also flourish in their social lives while still holding their nerdy interests. And that's the best life you can have, when you can combine good social skills with a fun social life. Enjoy your interests. Don't be egotistical. You've got to suppress your ego for wanting more popularity. Though in the early stages it may be necessary for you to step out of your old friendship group, your comfort zone, to make new friends, and eventually reincorporate your nerdy passions into whatever you want so that you are not faking it when you present yourself to the world. You don't have to feel like you're wearing a mask that's hiding who you truly are to the world, and that can play very negative mental effects on you. It's not nice to mask, it's not nice to fake who you are. So you build your social skills and then you eventually become a social king in the passion or area or subject that you choose to be in. And at that point, you can help inspire others to talk about their passions and have a great time. Thank you so much for listening. Take care, you got this, and I'll see you in the next video.